March 26, 1942. 9 o'clock in the evening. 1,800 yards off the New Jersey coast, the Atlantic Ocean was black as coal and twice as cold. Lieutenant Commander James Crawford stood on the bridge of USS Phantom, watching darkness swallow the horizon. He was 34 years old, Pennsylvania coal country raised, Naval Academy class of 1930. 12 years of peacetime service had taught him everything about commanding ships and nothing about dying. Behind him, 141 men waited in the darkness, boys most of them, teenagers from Iowa farms and Pennsylvania steel mills who had enlisted after Pearl Harbor wanting to strike back. They believed in their training, believed in their hidden guns, believed that American courage could defeat German submarines hunting from the depths with torpedoes designed to kill without ever surfacing. They did not know that 700 miles away in Berlin, German intelligence officers were reading American naval communications faster than Admiral Robert Sterling's staff could decode them. They did not know their mission was compromised before they left Portsmouth. They were sailing toward death, believing it was toward glory. Wind whipped across the deck, carrying salt and diesel fuel and something else. Fear, maybe. The smell of old metal preparing to die. Crawford's hands gripped the bridge rail, knuckles white from cold or tension. Probably both. He thought about his wife Catherine, 8 months pregnant, in Philadelphia, about the letter he had left with their landlady, about the pot roast promise he would probably never keep. In 3 hours, everything would be over. 141 men dead, 0 survivors. The ocean would take them all and never give them back. If you or someone you love served during World War II, if you understand that war is young men dying for old men's decisions, this story honors that sacrifice. Subscribe now, because what happens next will change everything the Navy believed about fighting submarines. The lesson will be paid for in blood, but it will save hundreds of thousands of lives. The numbers were worse than Pearl Harbor. Not dramatic exaggeration. Mathematical fact. Between January and March of 1942, German submarines sank 73 Allied ships in American waters. More than 2 vessels destroyed every single day. Bodies washed ashore on New Jersey beaches. Oil slicks covered Florida coastlines so thick that children could not swim. Wreckage floated past luxury hotels where tourists sipped cocktails and watched tankers burn on the horizon like fireworks, celebrating American failure. The Germans called it the second happy time, a hunting season unlike anything in naval warfare history. U-boats surfaced at night so close to shore, their commanders could see automobile headlights on coastal highways. They torpedoed ships within sight of the Statue of Liberty. They photographed Times Square's glow from their conning towers as souvenirs to send home. Miami Beach hotels blazed with light every night. Atlantic City boardwalks glowed like beacons. Tourism dollars mattered more than sailor lives. Against that brilliant backdrop, merchant ships sailed in perfect silhouette, easy targets for any submarine commander patient enough to wait. The United States Navy, the most powerful naval force on Earth, seemed utterly powerless to stop them. President Franklin Roosevelt summoned Admiral Robert Sterling to the White House on January 28th. The meeting lasted less than 10 minutes. Roosevelt's question was simple. What about Q ships? Sterling knew the concept. Britain had used armed vessels disguised as merchant ships during the First World War. The tactic was clever. A lone freighter would sail through dangerous waters looking helpless. When a U-boat surfaced to attack with its deck gun, hidden panels would drop, revealing naval weapons. Machine guns would open fire. The submarine caught on the surface would be destroyed before it could dive. Between 1915 and 1918, British Q ships sank 14 German submarines. It worked beautifully against an enemy that had not learned to be cautious. But 1942 was not 1917. Modern U-boats rarely surfaced to attack. Their torpedoes could sink merchant ships from 4,000 yards while completely submerged. German commanders had studied the Q ship disasters. They were trained to be suspicious, to attack from underwater, to never give the enemy a chance. Sterling told Roosevelt the truth. Q ships are obsolete, Mr. President. Modern submarines will not fall for tricks that worked 25 years ago. Roosevelt's response was political reality delivered like a hammer blow. Then make the tricks better, or keep losing 2 ships every day. The American people are watching tankers explode in front of their vacation beaches. They want action, not excuses. 3 days later, Sterling authorized Project Shadow. The Navy would convert old merchant vessels into Q-ships. They would sail into the killing grounds. They would try to lure U-boats into traps. Nobody believed it would work, but political pressure demanded action. Any action, even desperate action, that would get men killed. James Crawford was born in Altoona, Pennsylvania in 1908, coal country, the kind of place where men go underground at 16 and come up at 60 with lungs full of black dust and bodies broken from crawling through tunnels never designed for human comfort. His father, Thomas Crawford, worked the mines for 32 years. The coughing started in his 50s, black lung they called it. Drowning on dry land, his lungs filling with fluid, while his body fought for oxygen that would not come. Tom Crawford died in 1935 in a company hospital bed. His last words to Jim came between coughs that brought up blood. "You got out, boy. Stay out. Some men dig coal. Some men command ships. The difference is opportunity. You are better than the mines. Be better." Jim had won appointment to the Naval Academy in 1926. His father worked double shifts for 2 years, paying for tutoring. Every extra dollar went toward books and mathematics lessons. Tom Crawford believed his son deserved a chance at life above ground. Jim graduated Annapolis in 1930, middle of his class. Competent, reliable, unremarkable. He served on destroyers during peacetime. The kind of career that ends in quiet retirement without ever seeing combat. Passed over for promotion twice by 1941. Going nowhere. Then Pearl Harbor changed everything. Crawford volunteered for hazardous duty December 8th, the day after the attack. He did not know what the assignment involved. Only knew his father had died believing that Tom Crawford's son would do something meaningful. That coal dust and sacrifice would purchase something larger than personal advancement. The Navy assigned him to command USS Phantom in February 1942. Catherine Crawford learned about it before Jim did. The telegram arrived February 14th, Valentine's Day. She was 8 months pregnant. They had been married 6 years. She read the words hazardous duty and understood what they meant. The sea takes men. Sometimes it gives them back. Sometimes it does not. That night they sat in their small Philadelphia boarding house room and talked about hard things, where Catherine would live while Jim was at sea, what to name the baby if Jim did not return, whether she was strong enough to raise a child alone. Catherine came from Philadelphia Quakers who had survived the Revolution and the Civil War. She had steel in her spine that did not show until pressure was applied. But she also had love in her heart that made the steel hurt when she thought about Jim sailing toward death. "Promise me something," she said. Her hands rested on her swollen belly. The baby was kicking. "Anything. Promise you will come back for pot roast. Same recipe, same Sunday dinners. Promise you will come home." Jim took her hand, felt the wedding ring he had placed there 6 years ago. "I promise." Knowing he was lying, knowing she knew, knowing some promises are made not because you can keep them, but because the person you love needs to hear them. After Catherine fell asleep, Jim wrote a letter, sealed it, left it with the landlady with instructions. "If I do not come back, give this to Catherine after the baby is born." The letter said what he could not say to her face. "Catherine, name our son Patrick. Tell him his father tried to do something that mattered. Tell him courage is not always enough, but trying is worth something. Tell him I loved you both more than any ocean could measure. And Catherine, make the pot roast again. Do not let my death kill your joy. I love you. Always. Jim." Catherine would keep that letter sealed for 57 years, would carry it through widowhood and remarriage and old age, would finally open it in 1999 at age 91 while sitting in a wheelchair at a memorial service for 141 men who died on a ship most Americans never heard of. When she read it, she would cry for the first time since 1942. Not from grief, from anger, because by then she would know the truth about how Jim died. And the truth was worse than any grief. Portsmouth Naval Yard, March 22, 1942, 6 o'clock evening. The mess hall was crowded with sailors preparing to deploy. USS Phantom's crew sat together at long tables. Metal trays loaded with food the Navy served before sending men into danger. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, carrots, thick white bread with real butter. Strong coffee, apple pie if you had room. Feed the men well before combat. Give them full bellies and warm memories. Make sure their last meal is worth remembering. Crawford sat with his officers near the windows. Phantom was visible through the glass, an old freighter built in 1912 for banana trade, 30 years old. Slow, rust-streaked, listing to port even at anchor. She looked like what she was, a floating coffin disguised as a secret weapon. Crawford tried to eat, cut his pot roast into pieces, chewed mechanically, tasted nothing. The food might as well have been sawdust. He had read the intelligence briefs. Modern U-boats were faster, better armed, commanded by professionals. Asking a 30-year-old freighter to hunt submarines was like sending cavalry against tanks. Might look heroic, would definitely end in blood, but orders were orders. The Navy needed to be seen doing something. Political pressure trumped tactical reality. Crawford would take his ship and crew into the Atlantic and try to spring a trap that would not work. And if they died, at least it would look like America was fighting back. Across the table, Ensign Robert Lee ate with Depression-era efficiency. Everything on his plate disappeared. No waste. Food was never taken for granted when you remembered being hungry. Robert was 23, Chinese-American. Born San Francisco, MIT graduate. He had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment he could find. After Pearl Harbor, every Asian face was suspect. Proof of loyalty required blood sacrifice. He looked around the mess hall, wondered which men would die. Q ships had the highest casualty rate of any naval assignment. Some would make it, most would not. The mathematics were brutal. At the far end, Seaman First Class Tommy Sullivan sat with enlisted men, age 19. First time away from Iowa. First time seeing an ocean. Tommy was writing a postcard between bites of pot roast. Careful, neat handwriting from one-room schoolhouse teaching. Dear Ma, food was great tonight. They take good care of us. Do not worry. Learning important things. Will write from sea. Your loving son, Tommy. He would mail it tomorrow morning. It would arrive in Des Moines March 30th. His mother would receive it the same day the telegram arrived. Missing in action, presumed lost at sea. She would frame that postcard. Hang it beside Tommy's graduation photo and 4-H ribbons. Keep it there the rest of her life. Proof her son had been happy at the end. That he had eaten well. That he had thought of her. Chief Petty Officer Frank Donovan sat with senior enlisted men, age 42, 20 years Navy, married. 3 daughters in San Diego who sent crayon drawings he kept folded in his sea bag. Frank looked at Phantom through the windows and saw exactly what she was, a death trap. But he also looked at teenage volunteers and saw his own daughters, 19, 21, 17. Is that made you think you were immortal? Somebody with experience needed to try keeping these boys alive. Frank figured he was old enough and mean enough to maybe succeed. A gunner's mate whispered, Chief, you think this is going to work? Donovan cut his pot roast. The meat was tender, cooked slow until it fell apart. The gravy was thick and brown, made from pan drippings and beef stock simmered for hours. Someone cared enough to cook it right. He swallowed, chose words carefully. We will do our jobs, follow our training, handle it like professionals. That is all any sailor can do. Not an answer, but the truth. The pot roast had cooked since noon, slow roasted until the beef dissolved on your tongue. The smell filled the galley for hours. Rich meat, caramelized onions, carrots soft enough to cut with a spoon, potatoes that had absorbed cooking juices until they tasted like condensed beef. Tommy Sullivan cut a small piece, put it in his mouth, chewed slowly, tasted salt and pepper, and something that reminded him of Sunday dinners after church. His mother made pot roast every week. Same recipe from her mother. He closed his eyes, was back in Iowa, sitting at the kitchen table, listening to his father talk about corn prices and weather. Then opened his eyes, back in Portsmouth, back in the Navy. Sunday dinners were memory. The Atlantic was waiting. Robert Lee noticed Crawford was not eating. The commander was pushing food around his plate, pretending to chew, nothing disappearing. Robert had seen that before. His father did the same during the Depression when there was not enough food. Parents pretended to eat while children got full meals. Crawford was pretending because he knew something they did not. The mission was doomed. They were sailing toward death, could not share that knowledge. would destroy morale, so he sat moving pot roast around his plate, carrying the weight of 141 lives he could not save. After dinner, the crew assembled on deck for final briefing. Crawford stood before them in cold March wind. Behind him, Phantom looked like a ship that should have been scrapped. Rust like dried blood, engines wheezing, listing to port. Crawford spoke clearly, simply, without false hope. Tomorrow we sail into the Atlantic. Our mission is classified. Do not discuss it outside this crew. Do not write home about specifics. Follow orders precisely. Trust your training. Some of you will not return. That is war's nature. But you volunteered knowing the risks. I am honored to serve with you. The men filed below. Crawford remained alone, staring at dark water, thinking about Catherine, about the baby due in 6 weeks, about his father coughing up coal dust, about promises he might not keep. A voice behind him, Commander the Robert Lee at attention. Permission to speak freely, sir. Granted. You do not think this will work, do you? Crawford considered lying, considered all the things commanders say to maintain morale, then looked at Robert's face and saw intelligence deserving honesty. No, Ensign. The Germans have been warned about Q ships. They will not surface in range. They will use torpedoes from safe distance. But we try anyway, because that is what we signed up for. Because sometimes trying matters even when success is impossible. Robert nodded. Thank you for the truth, sir. 700 miles away in Washington, Commander Daniel Mitchell was discovering the security breach that had compromised Project Shadow. German intelligence had penetrated American naval communications, had read every classified message, had warned every U-boat commander about disguised merchant ships. Mitchell composed an urgent telegram, trying to recall the mission, trying to save 141 lives. The telegram arrived on Admiral Sterling's desk at 1745 hours. The Admiral was at dinner, would not return until 2200 hours. 3 hours. The difference between life and death. By the time Sterling read the warning, USS Phantom would be at sea, already steaming toward Klaus Brenner's U-boat, already doomed. Mitchell would read the timestamp later, would understand that institutional dysfunction killed those men as surely as torpedoes, that a dinner that could not be interrupted, a message that could wait, procedures that valued protocol over urgency. He would carry that knowledge the rest of his life, would use it to build intelligence systems that would win the war. But he could not save Phantom's crew. They were already gone. March 23rd, dawn. Gray sky, heavy with storm promises. USS Phantom cleared Portsmouth Harbor without ceremony. No band, no crowds, no indication she was anything except another tired merchant vessel heading into waters where ships died every day. Crawford watched land disappear, thought about Catherine, the letter with the landlady, the pot roast promise he would not keep. Below decks, 141 men settled into watches. Hidden guns stayed concealed. Depth charges disguised. Everything looked normal. Helpless, vulnerable. Tommy Sullivan stood on deck during off-watch, staring at the Atlantic, bigger than he imagined, more powerful, more indifferent. He thought about Iowa cornfields going forever in straight lines. The ocean was opposite, chaos, movement, depths that swallowed men without memory. He pulled his mother's Bible from his pocket, opened to Psalm 107, the verse she read at breakfast when he left. They that go down to the sea in ships that do business in great waters, these see the works of the Lord and his wonders in the deep. Chief Donovan saw Tommy reading, walked over, hand on the boy's shoulder. You okay, son? Yes, Chief, just thinking. It is a lot of ocean. That it is, but we have a good ship, good crew. We will be fine. Donovan did not believe it, said it anyway. Because chiefs lie to protect the young, carry the burden of knowledge so others carry the burden of hope. Eddie Murphy was in the engine room checking every valve, every gauge. The engines were old, temperamental, wheezed and groaned and leaked oil. But Murphy understood engines, had worked them since age 12, helping his father maintain coal mine machinery. He knew how to coax performance from machines that should have died years ago. The engines would run, would give their best, would die trying like everything else on this ship. On March 26th at 1800 hours, Phantom's lookout spotted smoke on the horizon. U-boat 156 had found them. Klaus Brenner was calculating his attack. In 3 hours, 141 Americans would be dead. 0 survivors. The Atlantic would take them all. And the United States Navy would learn an expensive lesson. That courage is not armor. That deception cannot defeat technology. That sometimes the bravest thing is admitting you cannot win with the weapons you have. The lesson would cost 141 lives, but it would save hundreds of thousands in the years to come. Because sometimes failure teaches better than success. Sometimes death has meaning. Sometimes the men who die, proving what does not work, do more good than they ever could have done, proving what does. Catherine Crawford would give birth April 12, 1942. A boy, named Patrick as Jim requested. Patrick would grow up never knowing his father. Would join the Navy himself in 1960, serve on destroyers in Vietnam, retire as commander. He would wait until 1999, age 57, to finally learn how his father died. And when he learned the truth, he would understand why his mother kept that letter sealed for so long, why she cried when she finally read it, why anger, not grief, was the emotion that survived 57 years. Because Jim Crawford did not die fighting the enemy. He died because institutional pride mattered more than tactical reality, because political pressure demanded action over wisdom, because sometimes good men follow orders that will kill them, and the only thing that makes their deaths meaningful is whether anyone learns from the mistake. The Navy would learn, would abandon Q ships, would develop convoy tactics, would build the intelligence systems that would turn the Battle of the Atlantic from slaughter into victory. But that learning would come too late for 141 men sailing into darkness believing courage was enough. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was all they had, and they gave it completely. Kapitän Leutnant Klaus Brenner was 29 years old when he first saw USS Phantom through his periscope. Born in Bremerhaven, a fishing port on the North Sea where the wind never stops blowing and the water tastes like iron. His father was a fisherman. His grandfather was a fisherman. Klaus was supposed to be a fisherman, but he wanted something more than nets and tides and a life measured in catches. He joined the Kriegsmarine in 1935, volunteered for submarine service in 1938, because U-boats represented the future. Speed, technology, power that could sink battleships from invisible positions beneath the waves. By 1942, he was one of Germany's most successful commanders. 7 ships sunk on this patrol alone. 14 total victories since the war began. Methodical, cautious, professional. Exactly the kind of officer Admiral Dönitz valued. Klaus was also engaged to be married. Gerda Braun worked as a nurse in Bremen. They had met in 1940 when Klaus was recovering from appendicitis. She had changed his bandages and brought him soup and smiled at him in a way that made him believe in futures beyond the war. Beautiful, intelligent, patient enough to wait for a submariner who disappeared for months at a time and might not come back. She wrote him letters every week. Klaus kept them folded in his jacket pocket. The most recent had arrived before he left Lorient. He had read it so many times the paper was soft as cloth. Come home, Klaus. Come home and let us start our life together. I am tired of waiting, tired of fear. Just come home. Klaus had written back promising this would be his last patrol. After this trip, he would request shore duty. They would marry. He would never leave her again. He meant it. Was tired of depth charges. Tired of watching merchant sailors drown. Tired of the fear that lived in his chest every time he submerged, wondering if this dive would be the one that never surfaced. One more kill, then home to Gerda and a life above water. The crew of U-boat 156 ate dinner in the cramped forward torpedo room. Space was so limited that men ate in shifts balanced on ammunition crates and folded blankets. The meal was simple: black bread, sausage, cheese, weak coffee made from grounds used 3 times already. Submarines did not have luxury of fresh food. Everything was preserved, canned, designed to last weeks without refrigeration. After 14 days at sea, even the bread was stale and the sausage tasted like salted leather. But it was food, it was warm, it kept men alive. Klaus ate with his first officer, Hans Weber, 32 years old, married with 2 sons back in Hamburg. Hans had been Klaus's second in command for 8 months. They trusted each other with their lives because submarine service demanded absolute trust. One mistake from any crew member could kill everyone. Hans chewed his bread slowly, studying the patrol chart spread across his knees. Another freighter, Capitaine. Looks like it. Smoke suggests old engines. Slow. Probably 8 or 9 knots maximum. Torpedoes, we have 3 remaining. Use 1, save 2 for the return trip in case we encounter escorts. Klaus pulled Gerda's photograph from his pocket, studied her face in the dim torpedo room lighting. In the picture, she was smiling. Blonde hair pulled back, blue eyes that made him believe in happiness. The kind of smile that promised home and safety and all the things war destroys. Hans noticed. Thinking about after. Always. This one, then home, this one. Then I request shore duty. Gerda and I marry. No more patrols. Good. You deserve happiness, Capitan. Klaus put the photograph away, finished his bread, drank the bitter coffee that tasted like burnt acorns. In 76 years, he would die at age 105 in a comfortable bed in Bremen, surrounded by children and grandchildren. He would give interviews about his war service, write memoirs, speak at conferences about submarine tactics. He would describe the night he sank the American Q ship as one of his greatest victories, proof of his skill and caution. He would never learn that German intelligence had compromised the American mission before it began, would never know that USS Phantom's crew was doomed the moment they left Portsmouth, would die believing he had outwitted the Americans through superior tactics and training. The truth would remain classified until 2025. 7 years after his death. Too late for Klaus Brenner to understand that his greatest victory was enabled by intelligence intercepts he never knew existed. March 26, 1942, 8 o'clock evening. U-boat 156 approached from Phantom's starboard quarter, 700 yards. Klaus studied the freighter through his periscope. Old, slow, defenseless. Exactly like every other target he had sunk in the past 2 weeks. Smoke from the stack suggested struggling engines. The ship was wallowing in heavy seas, listing slightly. No escort vessels visible. No aircraft overhead. Perfect. Fire one, Klaus ordered. The torpedo left its tube with a compressed air hiss, raced through dark water at 44 knots, covered 700 yards in 38 seconds. On Phantom's bridge, Crawford saw the wake. White phosphorescence in black water, coming straight at them. Torpedo inbound, all hands braced for impact. Men grabbed whatever they could hold. Crawford gripped the bridge rail, counted seconds. 3, 2, 1. The explosion tore through Phantom's forward hold like God's fist punching through steel. Fire erupted, orange and yellow flames shooting 50 feet into the night sky. Metal twisted, bulkheads buckled. The ship shuddered like a living thing stabbed through the heart. Tommy Sullivan was thrown from his bunk in the forward berthing compartment, hit his head on a pipe, tasted blood, heard screaming. The lights went out. Emergency lanterns clicked on, bathing everything in hellish red. He stumbled toward his battle station. Following training, even though his ears were ringing and he could not hear the orders being shouted, his hands found the ladder. Started climbing toward the gun deck. In the engine room, Eddie Murphy grabbed the damage control phone. Bridge engineer room, taking water forward. Pumps are operational, but we cannot keep up. Crawford's voice came back steady despite the chaos. Maintain engine power. Prepare to implement deception plan on my signal. The deception plan was the performance they had rehearsed for weeks. Crawford keyed the ship's whistle. 3 short blasts, the signal. Crew members launched lifeboats. Men scrambled over rails in apparent panic, shouting. Some intentionally fell into the water. Others rowed away from the burning ship in boats that would later be found empty, drifting 80 miles south with no trace of the men who had launched them. From his periscope, Klaus watched with professional satisfaction. The freighter was sinking, crew abandoning ship. Standard merchant sailor panic when torpedoed. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. He made the decision that would seal both their fates. Surface, we finish them with the deck gun. Save our remaining torpedoes. U-boat 156 broke the surface 600 yards from Phantom. The conning tower appeared, first water streaming from the metal, then the deck. Klaus climbed out, followed by his gun crew. They began rotating the 88mm deck gun toward the burning freighter. On Phantom's bridge, Crawford watched through binoculars. His heart hammered against his ribs. This was the moment. Everything depended on timing. Too early and the submarine would dive before they could hit it. Too late and the ship would sink before they could fire. "Stand by," he said quietly into the intercom. "Weapons crews prepare to unmask on my command." Chief Donovan stood at one of the hidden 4-inch guns. His hands were steady on the firing controls. Behind him, 3 young sailors waited. Donovan looked at them, saw fear, saw determination, saw boys who would be dead in the hours and did not know it yet. "Easy, men," he said softly. "Wait for the order. When it comes, put rounds on target. That is all we can do." Crawford watched U-boat 156 through his binoculars. The German gun crew was almost ready. The 88mm was nearly in position. If he waited 10 more seconds, they might get a shot off first. "Now," Crawford shouted, "unmask, weapons, fire." The hydraulic panels dropped. Hidden guns swung into position. 4 4-inch naval guns revealed themselves. Machine gun nests opened up. The entire ship transformed from helpless victim to armed warship in less than 5 seconds. Donovan fired first. The 4-inch gun roared. Recoil slammed his shoulder. The shell screamed toward U-boat 156, trailing smoke and the promise of victory. For one perfect instant, it looked like the trap would work. The submarine was exposed. The range was perfect. One hit could end the war for Klaus Brenner and his crew. The shell missed by 15 feet, exploded in the water alongside the submarine, sent up a column of spray, did no damage. The second gun fired, also missed, over by 20 feet. The third and fourth guns fired together. Both shells passed over the conning tower and splashed harmlessly beyond. 4 shots, 4 misses. The entire ambush failing in real time. The machine guns had better luck. Tracer fire raked U-boat 156's deck. Bullets sparked off of the conning tower. One German sailor went down wounded in the shoulder, but the submarine's vital systems were untouched. Klaus reacted with veteran instinct. "Dive, dive, dive!" His crew scrambled below. Hatches clanged shut. Ballast tanks flooded. The submarine began sinking beneath the waves. On Phantom's bridge, Crawford watched his ambush collapse. The plan had been built on one assumption, that they could sink the submarine before it could dive. They had 5 seconds. They had fired 8 rounds. Missed every shot. Now the submarine was gone, submerged, invisible, and very angry. Robert Lee stood next to Crawford. Watched the U-boat disappear beneath dark water. "We just told them exactly what we are."
There's no time
Crawford
to
nodded
waste.
grimly. "And now they know our only trick." Beneath the waves, Klaus assessed damage. 1 man wounded, conning tower scratched, systems operational. His first reaction was anger. The Americans had tried to trap him. Disguised warship. Q-ship. He had read the warnings from headquarters, had not fully believed them until now. His second reaction was professional calculation. The freighter was still afloat, still dangerous with those hidden guns, still needed to be destroyed. But now he would do it the safe way, the right way, the way that gave the enemy no chance to fight back. "Make ready, tube 2. We circle and strike the engine order in a room. Without power, they cannot maneuver. Without maneuver, they die." U-boat 156 circled beneath the surface like a shark studying wounded prey. Klaus took his time, calculated angles, waited for the perfect shot. On Phantom, Crawford knew what was coming. "All hands prepare for second impact. Damage control teams stand by. Engineering, give me everything you have got. We need to maneuver." Eddie Murphy was already pushing the ancient engines past their design limits. Temperature gauges were in the red. Oil pressure dropping. The engine shook so badly that bolts were loosening, but they were producing power, and power meant options. Crawford ordered a turn to starboard. Phantom responded sluggishly. She was designed for straight-line cargo hauling, not tactical maneuvering. But she turned, slowly, painfully, not fast enough. At 21:29 hours, Klaus fired his second torpedo. Range 800 yards. Target Phantom's engine room. Calculated to stop the ship dead without sinking her immediately. The torpedo ran straight and true. Eddie Murphy saw it coming on the depth gauge. Had time to shout a warning. Torpedo inbound engine room brace. Then it hit. The explosion was catastrophic. The engine room became an inferno. Superheated steam filled the compartment at 300 degrees. Metal twisted like paper. The engines that had been straining beyond their limits did bide in an instant, ripped apart by the blast. Eddie Murphy died at his post, so did 6 other men in engineering. They had no time to abandon ship, no time to escape. The explosion and the steam killed them in seconds. Quick deaths, at least. Better than drowning. Better than burning. Phantom went dead in the water. Lights went out. Emergency generators kicked in for critical systems only. Most of the ship was dark. In the forward hold, Tommy Sullivan was helping with damage control when the second torpedo hit. The impact threw him across the compartment. He landed hard against a bulkhead, felt something break in his ribs, could not breathe, pain like knives in his chest. A petty officer dragged him toward a hatch. "Come on, kid. We are abandoning ship." On the bridge, Crawford made the hardest decision of his life. His ship was dying. Half his crew was dead or wounded. The submarine was still out there circling, waiting. He could order everyone to abandon ship, hope some would survive, or he could keep fighting and guarantee everyone would die. He chose to fight. "All remaining gun crews stand by. If the bastard surfaces again, we engage." Chief Donovan heard the order, understood what it meant. They were staying aboard a sinking ship to fight an enemy they could not see. It was suicide. It was also duty. He looked at the young sailors at his gun station. "You heard the commander. We stay until ordered otherwise. Check your ammunition. Prepare for surface contact." Phantom refused to sink. The pulpwood packed into her holds did exactly what it was designed to do. It kept the ship afloat even with 2 torpedo holes in her hull. Water poured in. The ship was burning, listing 15 degrees, but still afloat. Klaus circled for 2 hours, watching, waiting for the ship to sink, conserving his last torpedo. Above, the weather was changing, wind increasing to 40 knots, waves building to 12 feet. The storm that had been threatening all day arrived with full fury. On Phantom, the crew fought for survival. Damage control parties plugged leaks. Fire brigades battled flames. Wounded men were carried to makeshift aid stations. The ship was dying by inches, but she was not dead yet. Tommy Sullivan lay in a passageway, ribs broken, breathing shallow. A corpsman had given him morphine. Everything was distant and dreamlike. He could hear men shouting, could smell smoke and salt water, could feel the ship shuddering beneath him. He thought about Iowa, about his mother's kitchen, about Sunday dinners and the Bible verse she had read at breakfast. The morning he left, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." He wanted to go home, wanted to see the cornfields one more time, wanted to tell his mother he was sorry for leaving. But he could not, because the ocean did not care what you wanted. The ocean took everyone eventually. Chief Donovan worked his way through damaged sections, checking on men, offering encouragement, lying with practiced ease about their chances of survival. He found Tommy in the passageway, knelt beside the boy, saw the morphine haze in his eyes. "How you doing, Sullivan?" "I am okay, Chief. Little cold." Donovan took off his jacket, covered Tommy with it. "There you go. Better." "Yes, Chief. Thank you." Tommy's voice was faint. "Chief, are we going to be okay?" Donovan looked at the boy's face. 19 years old, Iowa farm boy who had never seen the ocean before 2 weeks ago, now dying in it. "Yeah, son, we are going to be fine. You just rest." "Okay, Chief, I will rest." Tommy closed his eyes. His breathing was shallow, irregular. Donovan stayed with him, held his hand, talked quietly about Iowa and cornfields and things that had nothing to do with burning ships and cold water. Tommy's breathing stopped at 2300 hours. Just stopped. No final words, no dramatic moment. One breath, then silence. Donovan closed Tommy's eyes, took his jacket back, folded it carefully, went back to his gun station. Because that is what chiefs do. They watch boys die, then they go back to work. At 2300 hours, the weather turned savage. Wind increased to gale force. Waves crashed over Phantom's deck. The storm that had been building all day arrived with Arctic fury. Crawford had ordered lifeboats launched hours ago as part of the deception plan. 5 boats in the water, some with wounded men, some with volunteers who were supposed to row to safety while Phantom fought. The storm destroyed them all. Lifeboats were swamped by 12-foot waves, overturned. Men in survival suits were thrown into 38-degree water. Hypothermia killed in minutes. The sea that Crawford had hoped would save some of his crew became their executioner. 3 days later, patrol aircraft would find 5 lifeboats drifting 80 miles south of the battle site. They would be intact, undamaged, empty. Not a single survivor. Not a body. Not a trace. Just ghost boats of men who had escaped one death only to meet another in the freezing Atlantic. Klaus surfaced one last time at 23:47 hours. The freighter was still burning. Still afloat, still refusing to die. He had to finish it. Running low on fuel, the storm was getting worse, and he wanted to go home to Gerda. Fire 3, the last torpedo left U-boat 156, struck Phantom beneath the waterline amidships. This time the explosion found something critical. Maybe a fuel tank, maybe ammunition, maybe just accumulated damage finally reaching critical mass. Phantom exploded like a bomb. The fireball lit up the Atlantic for 20 miles. Debris rained down across the waves. The shock wave rolled across the water like thunder. When the flames died, there was nothing left but darkness and burning oil slicks and pieces of metal sinking into depths that would never give them back. 141 men had sailed on USS Phantom. 141 men died that night, not a single survivor. Klaus watched through his periscope, felt satisfaction at a job completed, felt regret for the men he had killed, because despite everything, he was not a monster. Just a submariner doing his duty. He did not know their names, did not know they were volunteers, did not know the mission was doomed before it began. He only knew he had won and they had lost, and that was the nature of war. He ordered U-boat 156 to course for home. The submarine disappeared beneath storm waves. The ocean closed over the battle site as if nothing had happened. By dawn, the ocean was empty. Search planes found debris, oil slicks, pieces of life rafts. They found no bodies. The Atlantic keeps its dead. Philadelphia, March 30th, 1942, 2:30 in the afternoon. Catherine Crawford was folding baby clothes when the knock came. She was 8 months pregnant, due in 2 weeks. The nursery was almost ready. Jim's last letter had arrived 6 days ago. He could not tell her where he was or what he was doing, but he promised to be home for the baby's birth. She opened the door and saw the Western Union boy, age maybe 15, thin, nervous, holding a yellow telegram like it was a live grenade. Catherine's hands went to her belly, protective, knowing. Mrs. Crawford. Yes. Telegram from the Navy Department, ma'am. He handed it to her, stepped back, waited because sometimes people collapsed. Catherine did not collapse. She opened the telegram with steady hands, read the words that 10,000 other wives had read in the past 3 months. The Navy Department deeply regrets to inform you that your husband, Lieutenant Commander James Crawford, was lost at sea in the performance of his duty and service to his country. Further details cannot be provided due to operational security. The department extends its deepest sympathy. She read it twice. 3 times. The words did not change. Words did. Jim was dead. The pot roast promise would never be kept. The baby would grow up without a father. She did not cry. Not then. She thanked the Western Union boy, gave him a quarter, closed the door, walked to the kitchen, sat down at the table. Then she remembered the letter. The letter Jim had left with the landlady in Portsmouth, to be opened if he did not return. She could send for it, could read Jim's final words, but something stopped her. Some instinct that the letter would make the death real in a way the telegram did not. Not yet, not until the baby was born, not until she could read it without breaking. That letter would remain sealed for 57 years. In Des Moines, Tommy Sullivan's mother received her telegram while making dinner. Pot roast, Tommy's favorite. She was setting the table when the knock came. She did not collapse either. She finished setting the table, put the food away, then sat in Tommy's room and looked at his baseball glove and his 4-H ribbons and all the evidence of a life that had ended at 19. In San Diego, Frank Donovan's wife received her telegram with 3 daughters watching. The oldest was 15. She understood immediately. The youngest was 7. She asked why mommy was crying. Across America, 141 families received telegrams. 141 families were told their sons, husbands, fathers, brothers had died at sea. None were told about Q ships or Project Shadow, or the fact that German intelligence had compromised the mission before it began. The Navy classified everything. The families got grief and silence and unanswered questions that would haunt them for decades. Catherine Crawford gave birth April 12, 1942. A boy. She named him Patrick, as Jim had requested in the letter she had not yet read. Patrick Crawford would grow up never knowing his father, would join the Navy himself in 1960, serve on destroyers during Vietnam, retire as a commander in 1990. He would wait until 1999, age 57, to finally learn how his father really died. And when he learned the truth at a memorial service in Portsmouth, standing beside his 91-year-old mother in her wheelchair, he would understand why she had kept that letter sealed for so long, why she cried when she finally read it, why anger, not grief, was the emotion that survived 57 years. Because the men of USS Phantom did not die fighting a fair fight. They died because institutional pride mattered more than tactical reality, because political pressure demanded action over wisdom, because good men followed orders that would kill them, and the only meaning in their deaths was whether anyone learned from the mistake. The Navy would learn. But the lesson would come too late for 141 sailors who gave everything they had and discovered it was not enough. Washington, D.C., April 3, 1942. 9 o'clock morning. Admiral Robert Sterling received the classified after-action report on USS Phantom at his desk overlooking the Potomac River. The document was brief. The conclusions were brutal. Project Shadow Assessment. USS Phantom deployed March 23, 1942. Engaged U-boat, March 26, 1942. Revealed weapons failed to achieve kill. Destroyed by counterattack. Total casualties, 141, KIA 0 survivors. Enemy casualties, 1 wounded. Conclusion, Q-ship concept ineffective against modern submarine warfare. Sterling read the report 3 times, then he did something extraordinary for a flag officer. He wrote a personal note at the bottom in his own handwriting. We asked these men to fight a war that was already over. We sent them to die with tactics from 1917 against an enemy from 1942. This failure is institutional. It is unacceptable. It must never happen again. He summoned his staff to an emergency meeting. Admiral William Hartwell arrived expecting a standard debriefing. What he got was a confrontation that would change American naval strategy. Sterling spoke first. His voice was ice. Gentlemen, we have lost 141 men, proving that Q ships do not work. The question now is whether we learn from this failure or continue sending men to die with obsolete tactics. Hartwell bristled. He was 62 years old, 40 years in the Navy, believer in aggressive action and offensive thinking. The idea of admitting defeat went against everything he had learned. With respect, Admiral, one failure does not invalidate an entire concept. Phantom was compromised by intelligence leaks. With better security, better training, better execution, better luck, Sterling cut him off. We are not gambling with cards, Admiral. We are gambling with lives. And we just lost 141 because we refuse to accept that the world has changed. The Navy's tradition is offensive action. We hunt submarines, we destroy them. Convoy duty is defensive thinking. It is what the British have been doing successfully for 2 years while we lose 70 ships a month. Sterling placed a folder on the table, thick with charts and statistics. Commander Mitchell has prepared an analysis. I suggest you read it. Commander Daniel Mitchell stood, age 38, high school math teacher from Ohio before the war, drafted in 1940, assigned to naval intelligence because someone noticed he could solve complex problems faster than anyone else. He had been analyzing submarine warfare patterns for 6 months from a basement office most admirals did not know existed. Every officer in this room outranked him. Most had never heard his name. He was about to challenge everything they believed about fighting submarines. Gentlemen, I have plotted every U-boat attack in the Atlantic since January. 317 merchant ships sunk. The pattern is clear. Submarines attack lone vessels 92% of the time. They avoid convoys. They retreat when faced with coordinated defenses. He put a chart on the table, lines and numbers and brutal mathematics. British convoy losses in the North Atlantic average 4%. American unescorted ships along our coast are suffering 23% losses. We are losing ships 6 times faster than the British because we refuse to learn from their experience. Hartwell studied the chart. His face was stone. Convoys slow commerce. Tie up escorts. Make us look weak. Mitchell's response was instant, fearless, the kind of career suicide that only works when you are absolutely right. Convoys save lives. That should be our only concern. The room went silent. A commander had just challenged an admiral. In peacetime, it would have ended Mitchell's career. But this was not peacetime. This was a crisis. Sterling made his decision. We test convoy operations. Commander Mitchell, you have 2 weeks to prove your theory. Admiral Hartwell, you provide necessary resources. If Mitchell succeeds, we implement convoys fleet-wide. If he fails, we return to current operations. Mitchell returned to his basement office, began planning the convoy test. Then he noticed something in the intelligence files that made his blood run cold. The German radio message about Q ships had been intercepted on March 23rd, the same day Phantom deployed. The decrypt had been completed on March 26th at 17:30 hours, 3 hours before the battle. Mitchell pulled the message routing logs. The warning had been sent to Admiral Sterling's office at 17:45 hours. But Sterling had been at dinner. The message sat in his inbox unread until 2200 hours. By then, Phantom was at sea, already engaged, already doomed. Mitchell sat in his office staring at the timeline. The mission could have been recalled. 141 men could have been saved, but institutional dysfunction killed them as surely as Klaus Brenner's torpedoes. A dinner that could not be interrupted, a message that could wait, procedures that valued protocol over urgency. He wrote a memo documenting the failure. It was classified secret and buried in files that would not be opened for 45 years. Mitchell worked 20-hour days planning the convoy test. His wife Sarah brought him dinner at the office. Sandwiches, coffee, apple pie she had baked that morning because she knew he would not eat unless food appeared in front of him. "Daniel, you need to sleep. After this, after I prove this can work." Sarah sat across from him, watched him eat mechanically, barely tasting. She had been married to him for 15 years, knew that look. He was carrying weight that had nothing to do with convoy routes and escort patterns. What happened? Mitchell considered lying, then pulled the timeline from his files, showed her, explained how 141 men had died because a message sat in an inbox for 3 hours. "I could have saved them, Sarah, if I had called someone higher, if I had broken protocol. If I had, you did everything you could. You sent the warning. It is not your fault that the system failed them. Tell that to their families." Sarah took his hand, squeezed hard. "You cannot save the past, but you can save the future. That convoy test you are planning, that is how you honor them, by making sure it never happens again." Mitchell finished his sandwich, drank his coffee. The pie was good, apples and cinnamon and brown sugar crust that tasted like his mother used to make in Ohio before the war, before everything changed. He got back to work. The weight was still there, but now it had purpose. Cape Hatteras, April 18th, 1942. Dawn. The convoy assembled in gray light. 12 merchant ships formed into 4 columns. Precise spacing calculated from British experience. 4 destroyers and 2 Coast Guard cutters took positions around the perimeter. Above them, patrol aircraft flew search patterns covering 200 miles. Admiral Hartwell observed from USS Porter. He had made no secret of his skepticism. "Convoys teach the Germans we fear them. We should be attacking, not hiding." Mitchell was also aboard Porter. He had coordinated with British intelligence to identify probable U-boat positions. He knew at least 3 submarines were operating in the area. He had designed the convoy route specifically to pass through their hunting grounds. This was not a defensive test. This was a trap. At 1400 hours, destroyer USS Hamilton detected a submarine signature 4,000 yards off the convoy's starboard quarter. The U-boat was maneuvering to intercept, positioning itself for an attack run on the trailing merchant ships. Under normal circumstances, the submarine would have had a clear shot at isolated vessels that could not outrun torpedoes. But these were not normal circumstances. Hamilton immediately altered course toward the contact. 2 patrol aircraft diverted from their search patterns. The convoy executed a coordinated turn away from the threat opening range while escorts moved to engage. The German commander found himself facing something his training had not prepared him for. Coordinated defenses that knew exactly where he was. He dove deep and ran. At 17:30 hours, another submarine attempted approach from the convoy's bow. A patrol bomber spotted the periscope wake before escorts even registered contact. Depth charges forced the U-boat to retreat. The third submarine never even attempted an attack. Its commander monitored the convoy's radio traffic, observed the aircraft coverage, and concluded the risk was not worth it. The convoy reached its destination without losing a single ship. Admiral Hartwell reviewed the results in silence. 12 merchant ships had transited the deadliest waters in the Atlantic without a casualty. 3 U-boats detected engaged driven off. The numbers were undeniable. Unescorted ships in Cape Hatteras waters had suffered 23% loss rates. This convoy, 0%. Hartwell looked at Mitchell. His face was unreadable. "You were right. I was wrong." Sterling received the report that evening, issued orders the following morning. All merchant shipping along the eastern seaboard would transition to convoy operations within 30 days. Escort vessels would be reassigned from offensive patrols to convoy protection. The era of hunting submarines with bait was officially over. By May, organized convoys operated along the entire coast. By June, losses dropped 40%. By July, German submarine commanders were reporting to headquarters that American defenses had improved beyond recognition. The second happy time was ending. Admiral Karl Dönitz was already adapting. If you served in the Merchant Marine or Navy during World War II, if you remember the Atlantic convoys that kept Britain alive, share your memories in the comments. These stories matter. Subscribe because what happens next proves that wars are won by intelligence, not just courage. August 1942. The Atlantic. Dönitz had studied the convoy tactics, developed his counter-move. Instead of single submarines hunting alone, he concentrated groups of 5 to 10 U-boats against individual convoys. Wolfpack tactics, coordinated assaults that overwhelmed escort screens designed to handle 1 or 2 attackers. In one terrible week, German submarines sank 43 Allied ships in the North Atlantic. The victory Mitchell had achieved in April seemed fragile, temporary. Then came the breakthrough that would change everything. October 30th, 1942. Bletchley Park, England. British codebreakers cracked the German naval Enigma code. They could now read U-boat communications in real time. Every order from Dönitz, every position report from submarine commanders, every tactical plan. But using the intelligence without revealing the breakthrough required extraordinary discipline. Every decision based on code breaking had to be disguised as something else. Lucky guesses, direction finding, aerial reconnaissance, anything except the truth. On October 30th, decoded messages revealed Admiral Dönitz's largest Wolfpack operation of the war. 23 submarines would concentrate against convoy HX-217, scheduled to depart New York November 14th. The Germans expected to sink at least 15 ships, expected to prove that no convoy, however well protected, could survive concentrated attack. They did not expect the Allies to know exactly where every submarine would be positioned. Admiral Max Horton of the British Royal Navy and Admiral Sterling coordinated their response. For the first time in the war, both nations would use real-time intelligence about enemy positions. The plan was audacious. Instead of routing the convoy around the submarine concentration, they would sail directly through it. But the convoy would not be alone. Convoy HX-217 departed New York November 14th with 25 merchant ships. Surrounding them sailed 12 escort vessels, the largest protection force ever assembled for a single Atlantic convoy. Above them flew patrol aircraft providing continuous coverage. The Germans detected the convoy November 17th, began maneuvering into attack positions, following procedures that had worked brilliantly for months. But this time something was different. The first submarine to attempt approach was U-624. Her commander brought her to periscope depth at 03:40 hours, expecting to find a gap in the escort screen. Instead, he found destroyer HMS Hesperus bearing down on his exact position at flank speed. Depth charges exploded around U-624 before her commander even understood what was happening. The submarine survived barely but was forced to break off and retreat. At 05:15 hours, U-621, attempted a surface attack under cover of darkness. A patrol aircraft caught her in searchlight beam 4,000 yards from the convoy. Machine gun fire raked the submarine's deck. A depth charge exploded alongside. U-621 dove and did not surface again until the convoy was far beyond reach. Throughout November 18th, submarine after submarine attempted to penetrate the escort screen. Every attempt failed. The escorts seemed to know exactly where to position themselves. The aircraft seemed to arrive at precisely the right moments. By nightfall, Dönitz had lost contact with the convoy entirely. His submarines were scattered across hundreds of square miles of ocean, unable to concentrate, unable to understand why their tactics had suddenly stopped working. U-84 made the final attempt at 2200 hours. Her commander was experienced, aggressive, determined to salvage something from the failed operation. He approached from the convoy's stern, moving slowly to avoid detection, reached firing position 800 yards from a tanker. The torpedo left its tube at 22:17 hours. Then HMS Snowflake appeared out of the darkness. The corvette had been positioned based on intelligence that predicted exactly this approach angle. Her depth charges were already armed, her crew already at battle stations. The explosion that destroyed U-84 lit up the night sky for miles. Debris rained down across the cold Atlantic. When the flames died, there was nothing left but oil and silence. Convoy HX-217 reached Liverpool November 23rd. All 25 merchant ships arrived safely. Not a single vessel damaged. The largest wolf pack in the history of submarine warfare had been defeated without losing a single Allied ship. The news spread through naval commands on both sides of the Atlantic. Something fundamental had shifted. The tactics that made U-boats so deadly were no longer working. The convoys that had seemed vulnerable were suddenly untouchable. Nobody outside the highest classification levels understood exactly why, but the results spoke for themselves. In November 1942, Wolfpack attacks against intelligence, protected convoys achieved success rates below 8%. Attacks against unprotected convoys, 34%. The difference was not tactics or training or equipment. The difference was knowledge. Admiral Dönitz sensed something was wrong. His submarines reported encountering defenses that seemed impossibly well prepared. Convoys changed course at exactly the wrong moments for German attacks. Aircraft appeared precisely when submarines were most vulnerable. The pattern suggested a security breach of catastrophic proportions. But Dönitz could not bring himself to believe Enigma had been broken. German engineers assured him the encryption was unbreakable. The mathematics were too complex, the procedures too careful. So he searched for other explanations. Spies in French ports, direction-finding equipment, lucky guesses. He never found the truth. And while he searched, the Allies continued reading his mail. By December, shipping losses dropped 31% from October levels. Submarine kills increased 47%. By May 1943, Dönitz withdrew his U-boats from the North Atlantic convoy routes. Acknowledging defeat, the Battle of the Atlantic was won through intelligence coordination and lessons paid for by 141 men who died on USS Phantom. Klaus Brenner survived the war, returned to Germany, married Gerda, had children, became a successful businessman in Bremen. He gave interviews, wrote memoirs, described sinking the American Q ship as one of his greatest tactical victories. He died in 2018 at age 105, never knowing that the mission was compromised before it began, that German intelligence had read American communications, that his tactical victories were enabled by information the Allies chose to let pass. The truth remained classified until 2025, 7 years after his death. 1987. The Navy released Project Shadow files after 45 years of classification. Researchers discovered the security breach that compromised Phantom, the warning that came too late, the institutional failures that killed 141 men. Catherine Crawford was 78 years old when she read the truth in her morning newspaper. She had remarried in 1950, but kept the Crawford name for her son Patrick. She had lived 57 years believing Jim died in routine combat. Now she learned his mission was doomed before it began, that German intelligence had penetrated American communications, that the warning had sat unread in an inbox while Jim sailed to his death. She cried for the first time since 1942, not from grief, from anger. They knew, she told Patrick. They knew it would not work and sent him anyway. Portsmouth Naval Yard, November 11th, 1999. Veterans Day. The Navy dedicated a memorial to USS Phantom's crew. Black granite wall, 141 names. 200 family members attended. Many were elderly. Some were children when their fathers deployed and never returned. Catherine Crawford attended in a wheelchair, age 91. Patrick beside her, age 57, retired Navy commander who had served on destroyers in Vietnam. After the ceremony, the Navy served coffee and donuts in a reception hall. Catherine watched people eating, talking, remembering men who had been dead longer than many attendees had been alive. Patrick brought her coffee in a paper cup. Hospital cafeteria quality. Weak and bitter. "You okay, Mom?" Jim hated donuts, said they were efficient calories without soul. He would have laughed at this. Catherine pulled an envelope from her purse, yellow with age. Jim's handwriting on the front, the letter sealed for 57 years. He left this with the landlady in Portsmouth, to be given to me if he did not return. I could not read it. Not then. Too painful. Patrick recognized his father's handwriting, had never seen it before except in one official document at the Navy Archives. "Are you going to read it now?" Catherine opened it with shaking hands. The seal broke after 57 years. She unfolded the single page, read the words Jim had written in March 1942. "Catherine, if you are reading this, I did not make it home. Name our son Patrick after my father's father. Tell him his father tried to do something that mattered. Tell him courage is not always enough, but trying is worth something. Tell him I loved you both more than any ocean could measure. And Catherine, make the pot roast again. Do not let my death kill your joy. Promise me you will taste life again. I love you. Always. Jim." Catherine folded the letter carefully, looked at her son through tears. "I think it is time I made pot roast again." At the memorial ceremony, speakers included Navy brass and historians explaining Project Shadow and why it failed. The final speaker was Ellen Murphy, daughter of machinist's mate Eddie Murphy, who died in Phantom's engine room. Age 70, she had been 6 when her father deployed. "I am 70 years old. I have waited 64 years to understand how my father died. The Navy said classified for 45 years. My mother died in 1985, never knowing. She wrote letters, made phone calls, hired lawyers. Nothing worked. Now I know. He died because 141 brave men followed orders from leaders who should have known better. He died because the Navy tried to fight 1942 with 1917 tactics. He died because institutional pride mattered more than sailors' lives. I do not blame my father. I do not even blame the Navy anymore. I blame war. I blame the fact that sometimes good people make terrible decisions under impossible pressure. But I do blame the secrecy. Families deserve to know, even if the truth was painful. Today we have it. Today they can rest, all 141 of them, and all the families who waited. Thank you for this memorial. Thank you for the truth. And to every sailor who serves today, please remember your lives matter more than any mission, any tactic, any tradition. Just come home. After the speeches, Catherine asked Patrick to wheel her to the water's edge. The wind off the Atlantic was cold, smelled like salt and memory. She pulled Jim's Naval Academy ring from her purse, the ring he had left with her in 1942, the ring she had worn on a chain around her neck for 57 years. He has been waiting long enough, she said. She kissed the ring, threw it into the Atlantic with strength that surprised both of them. Now you are home, Jim. Now you can rest. The ocean accepted the offering without ceremony. The waves continued their eternal rhythm, indifferent to grief, indifferent to remembrance, taking everyone eventually. But memory endures, stories persist, and 141 names on black granite prove that even failed missions teach lessons worth learning. USS Phantom sailed into the Atlantic with hidden guns and desperate hope. She died proving that courage is not enough, that following orders is not always honorable, that the bravest thing is not always to fight, but sometimes to admit the fight cannot be won with the weapons you have. The men of USS Phantom did not sink a single submarine, but their sacrifice saved hundreds of thousands of lives by forcing the Navy to finally admit, we were wrong. Convoys replaced Q ships, Intelligence replaced guesswork. Coordination replaced chaos. By the end of the war, Allied anti-submarine forces had sunk 783 German U-boats. The supplies that sustained Britain and enabled D-Day crossed the Atlantic in convoys protected by lessons purchased with 141 lives. Commander Daniel Mitchell received the Navy Cross for his contributions to anti-submarine warfare. He rose to captain, helped establish the systems that evolved into modern naval intelligence. Retired in 1958 with little public recognition, died in 1975. His obituary was 3 paragraphs in the Ohio newspaper. His wife Sarah kept a photograph of him at his basement office desk in Washington, surrounded by charts, working 20-hour days, trying to save men who were already dead by learning from their deaths how to save men who were still alive. The photograph sat on her mantle until she died in 1998. At her funeral, their daughter mentioned that her father never talked about the war, never mentioned his Navy Cross, never claimed credit for the convoy system that saved so many lives. He just said he did what needed doing, and that 141 men paid for the lesson he was allowed to teach. That is the legacy of USS Phantom. Not the ship that failed, but the ship that failed in a way that mattered, that taught the Navy what did not work so clearly that even the most stubborn admirals could not ignore the lesson. Victory is purchased with lives. Progress is purchased with failure. Remembrance is the only currency that honors the dead. Sometimes the greatest victories begin with the courage to acknowledge defeat, to admit that traditions can become traps, that what worked in the past might kill you in the present, that learning from failure requires humility, but refusing to learn requires sending more men to die, proving what you should have known already. The men of USS Phantom died so the Navy could learn that lesson. Their deaths were not meaningless, but they should never have been necessary. That is the truth Catherine Crawford finally understood when she read Jim's letter after 57 years. That is why she cried from anger, not grief, because the men she loved died teaching a lesson the Navy should have learned without their blood. But they did die, and the lesson was learned, and hundreds of thousands of sailors came home because 141 did not. That is war's arithmetic. Brutal, unforgiving, true. And that is why their names are carved in black granite at Portsmouth. Why their story finally belongs to everyone. Why we remember. Not because they succeeded, but because their failure mattered more than most victories ever could.